In this video, I'm going to continue modeling the Samaritan pistol here, and I'm just going to try to introduce some more techniques and tools as we go along and finish out this piece here in this video. So the first place we're going to get going is right here where the hammer needs to strike. So there's a cutout that the hammer fits into, and then see up here there's a little bit of a slot that it dips down and this pin comes through. So these stand up as kind of little ears more or less. So I'm going to go ahead and start that, and I'm just going to do that with a boolean. So one thing to be aware of with booleans is they tend to create really ugly geometry. So you're going to have to go back and touch up the topology just to make sure everything connects the way it should. And by default it probably won't, because booleans just tend to make really bad geometry. Okay, this is definitely on the deep side, so I'm looking down here, and it's difficult to tell. Sometimes I can't see the geometry very well, so I'm just going to turn on wireframe unshaded, allow me to see what I got going on. And at this point, I'll probably just go ahead and start nudging this thing around based on the faces, just be a little faster than scaling. And this guy was pretty shallow, maybe somewhere around there. I'll try to get a sense. There's the depth right there. So if anything, I'm a little deep right there. So I think that's probably good. And then I want to bring this down to about the point where I want those dog ears or those ears to start. So I'll just check here. Looks like that's an indication right there of the cut in. See a little silver dip right there. So you can think of this kind of like when you're making a mold for something. I'm just creating the inverse of the shape that I want. So I'm going to go ahead and extrude this, pull that up, and then press G to extrude again. Whoops, except this time I want to grab this face, G to extrude again, and just pull that out here. So that is the inverse of the shape that I want, and it looks like it's going to work fine. It looks a little thin, maybe. Looks like the hammer should be a little bit thicker than that. So I'm going to go ahead and broaden this out a bit. Maybe something a little bit more like that. That looks pretty close. And then select the object that you want to be cut and the object that's doing the cutting. And then mesh, booleans, difference. There you go, chops it right out. And in this case it did a pretty good job. I have some n-gons over here, but these are flat. I'm not really concerned about that right now. That looks fine. And this is pretty nice for Maya's booleans. The only thing that I see here is notice that these edges here are sort of terminating into nothing. You don't want that. Like, you don't want to leave geometry hanging like this. So just grab these guys and just snap them up to another vert that's around here. So just something like this. And then this guy, there's no particular reason why that would be here. It doesn't make any difference. It's a straight line from this vert to this vert. So we'll just pick one of those and go to it. So there we go. That part's been cleaned up. And then down here, notice this is an n-gon. Not a huge deal, but it's also very easy to clean up from here. So if I just do an interactive split tool and just go from that edge to that edge, notice now quad, quad, and this will end up being a quad as well. I'll just use Y to repeat that last tool. So now you can see I've got a nice quad loop going again here. So that is now been cleaned up on that side as well. And it looks like I didn't have this thing quite deep enough. This needs to fit in where, look at this from the side again, where this is basically a round piece. It should probably be a little deeper, somewhere down here. And I can always change that later if I need to. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I feel fine about that. Now what I'd want to do is just go ahead and merge vertices, because I should have a few that need to get merged. So I have 120 right now, and now down to 116. So those that I pushed together up here have basically just been merged. So that gives us a good area for the hammer to live in, and gives us a little dog ears that we're going to use for that pin to catch. So now we'll come down here to the trigger guard area. Let's just take a look at this from the side. So we'll go ahead and create this trigger guard, and what I'd recommend is to try to look at your objects that you're modeling and see how a primitive might fit that, because it's really easy to start in this case from something like a cylinder and just pull out these outside edges here. A lot easier than you trying to line up a bunch of polys by hand into a sort of an oval. You get ovals for free. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that as a cylinder. And I probably need this thing to be a little bit higher res, maybe 24 or so. Pop that in here. Just scale it. And I want to scale it up. Again, we're seeing perspective here, so I want to scale this up where the top of this guy is getting up into this actual piece, and the bottom of it can come down to here. I'll just have to make a little bit of a guesstimate about where that's actually happening. That looks pretty good. And obviously, just do a scale out here and take a look at that in wireframe just to see what I've got going on. Looks like I could probably potentially scale this down just a hair and move it down a little bit just to keep this form just a little tighter than I've been able to. So something like that is looking like a better approximation. Widen that out. So see, that basically matches the shape, and it's pretty easy to do. So now I'll select both caps, and again I'll just do a marquee through it and then delete those, and then I'll do an extrusion and pull that extrusion out to the width of the trigger guard. So something like that looks pretty good. And then after that, basically all I need to do is grab these outside verts here and make sure to do a marquee selection. Since I'm dealing with something with volume, I need to always get the vert that I see and the vert that I don't see. So there's another vert behind this. So I'll just keep pulling these guys out here. So something like that's looking pretty good. Something to be aware of, again, is we are looking at this with perspective in the picture, so I don't want to match the top here. I want to sort of push it up pretty high, and I'll just do one final extrusion when I finish this, just to make sure it interpenetrates the other form. So here we go. So something like that looks pretty good. This guy probably should be down. You can see that it actually comes off just a little bit. So something like that's looking pretty good. So what I'm trying to do again is make these, I'm just going to grab these guys that aren't really being used and just delete them. So what I'm trying to do is basically make these come pretty close to this, but not quite into it. And I'm just going to extrude that to add this little bit of depth. You can see that this piece doesn't come up into a razor sharp form. It comes up and sort of flattens out right at the edge. So I'm going to pull these up pretty close, but not quite in, so that you can still see some of that depth. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. And if we look at this thing in shaded mode, it should be looking all right. It's probably way too thick. So there you go. It's mighty trigger guard. So go ahead and slim that guy down. Take a look at our reference image to see actually how big that thing should be. Okay, so there's a good one. So it looks like almost a straight up third, I would say. And notice here there is some variation. So it's a consistent thickness through most of it, and then it tapers up and gets a little wider towards the connection, which makes sense for stability. Let's just take a look at this thing from the top, for instance. So I'd say that's pretty close right there, which means now we just need to do the widening. Go ahead and double click those border edges. So got all those guys, and then press B to turn on soft selection, and then just grow that out, the distance of that taper. So something like that is probably pretty good, and just expand it and see how that gives you a nice smooth taper there. And if anything, I'd say maybe we need to take the whole thing down just a hair. So I'll just make that a little bit smaller. And now I'll grab those border edges, turn off soft selection. Again, that's just B, and then just do an extrude here. And instead of using the normal, I'm going to go ahead and switch this to the world axis and just pull those guys up. Again, I'm just trying to make them interpenetrate the form of this piece here. So that's pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my wireframe on shaded just to give you a sense of what that's looking like. So that's getting there. It's looking pretty good. I'll go ahead and add this trigger. So the trigger you could do any number of ways. I'll just go ahead and do create poly, since I did that in another video here. So I'll just go ahead and bring that down. And again, being aware that I can see the perspective in this. So this is actually the back side. This is the part that I'm trying to follow with this curve. So I'm going to keep it a little tight through there and then loosen it up just a bit. Okay, and again, this does need to go into this other piece. So again, that's what that's going to give us is a flat piece, which is not great for what we're doing. So I want to go ahead and extrude this guy. So just edit mesh, extrude. And what we're going to get here is an off-center piece because my extrusion is off-center. That first, the way that that draws by default is it's drawing on the 0 of the x-axis. But now I just extruded it and it's off-center. So what I want to do is just grab this guy and notice that its pivot point's out here. So I'll just do modify center pivot. Now the pivot's directly in the center of this thing. Go to the front view. Wireframe's probably easiest. And then display, turn on the grid, and then hold X and snap to grid. So now that thing's perfectly aligned to the center. And I'll go ahead and turn my grid back off just to get it out of the way. And then just got to scale this thing up to whatever it's supposed to be. Maybe something like that. And then it's a bit on the flat side. It looks fine from a distance, but if you wanted to add that little bit of extra bevel, so see this bevel that's happening here. If you wanted to do that, you don't have to do a bevel across all the edges. So again, from the side here, I might just pick the ones that make sense and bevel that. So just grab those edges. Again, the marquee is the way to make sure that you have both edges, and I don't want to do a giant marquee. I just want to do a little marquee that gets each one. Otherwise I'll get those side edges or these connecting sort of ring edges. So something like that is probably pretty good. So I'll just pull out to bevel. And then in this case, what bevel does is it basically looks to see what's the closest point where it's going to crash, and it sets that as the fraction that it can move on. So in this case, I don't want to offset as fraction. And obviously that's a little bit on the large side, so I'm just going to scale that down with virtual sliders, and I'll just use the control button or the control key to do that. So there, that pulls down, get a little bit of a bevel happening there. This guy up here gets a little bit funky. Let's see what we could do about that. So I'll just try to pull those in a little bit just to let that taper off, and then we could connect those guys up here. So just interactive split, that one to that one, and that one to that one, and then just need to soften those edges there. So I'll just go ahead and do that and soften those guys. That's a shift right click menu there. In fact, a bunch of these need to be softened. I'm not sure why I didn't notice that ahead of time, but I'd probably want to select that loop and not that edge, and that loop, not that edge, and go ahead and soften those guys out. For whatever reason, those are hard as well. I guess that angle is just a little steeper than the rest. I'll go ahead and soften those. So now that should give me a nice beveled front edge to that trigger. Looks looking pretty good. I think I could probably get away with softening that guy as well without it turning really dark and ugly on me. Yeah, that works well. So that looks pretty clean. So the last thing I need to do to complete this piece is fix the hinge. This is a hinge that the gun swings around, so the barrel and everything move based on that hinge. So I'll just try to find another image here. That's not a good one. There it is. So this piece is hinging around. So that means even though all the pictures I have, for whatever reason, are of the right side of the gun, it must mean that the left side of the gun, the round part of this hinge is attached to this part here. I guess there's probably some way that that might not be the case, but I'm guessing that's what's going on there. And I had one picture that sort of made me think that, and I'll see if I can find that. There it is, right there. So this one's a little hard to see. I'll try to zoom it in here to see if we can. So see, there's a little bit of a crack here, and I'll just try to bring it in a little bit more. So see that crack right there? So that made me think somewhere around the middle of this thing, this hinge is split, and this side is set to the rest of the gun, and this side is set to the part that is actually being held onto. I don't know the names of guns, so whatever those parts are called. So this part's going to be a little bit hairier, because now we need to split this guy and have half of the hinge live on the next part. So I'll go ahead and get started on that. First thing I would do is maybe split this along here. This is going to allow me to grab this piece and move it back to center. So again, I'll do that from the front view. I'll turn on my grid, and then I'll just move that. So again, I'll snap to the grid here. Whoops, I'm not sure why Maya doesn't keep up sometimes with that. Okay, so that leaves us this weird little area here. I could probably just can that guy, so we'll just throw that one away. And then the rest of this stuff I'll have to start work on building up. So to do that, I want to add the other half of this hinge. And in this case, basically all I want to do is add in a cylinder that is matching the resolution and size and all that kind of business. So as I recall, it was 12, and I think it was just straight default. So to line this guy up, I'm going to hold V, and I'm going to snap it to this center vert, and then V, and I'm going to only move Y and snap it on that vert, and now those are perfectly aligned. So grab my face here, hold V again for snap to vert, and I'll move that out, and then maybe I'll just slide this one over just a hair so there's a little bit of a crack between those two. And then this guy here, I'll just snap him to this edge. So something like that. So that's going to give me exactly where the hinge is going to be, and I'm not going to go through the whole process of making this hinge in this video, but this is exactly where it's going to be. So I need this form to accommodate and fit around this hinge piece. So I'll just go ahead and do it here. So what I want to do is cut this up in a couple of places where I can connect it up, or I can add some more geometry and go around this cylinder. So I'll go ahead and do that with the split tool here, like that. And it doesn't really matter where those land to begin with. I'm just trying to add the geometry that I need. Grab a vert here, V and snap, V and snap. And then notice that I've got sort of an established offset here. I want this to probably maybe not quite that large. Maybe I'll just extrude this guy up to fix that. So I'm just going to go ahead and set my offset right here, right now. So in order to do that effectively, I need these points to move away evenly from this form. So it's the same thing as growing this form. I don't want to move this vert just sort of randomly. I don't want to just grab it and say, well, I move it over here, and that works. So if you that could work based on how precise you want to be, but in this case, if I want to be a little more precise, I can select the face, edit mesh, and choose poke face here. And that'll just add a vert in the middle, and that'll give me an exact angle. So as long as I align to this angle right here, everything will work out fine. So I'll grab this vert, and then I'm going to go to the tool settings, make sure I'm in the move tool, and then set to edge, and then right click and choose edge here and select that edge. And see how that manipulator changes to exactly what that edge is facing? So now I can pull that down and then do the same thing on this guy, set to edge, make sure it's going to follow this edge, and then pull that down. So that gives me a very exact value that I can follow. And it looks like I'm going to need to go ahead and add one more up here. So I'll go ahead and add that from this vert right here. Let me make sure I got back to object mode here. And then interactive split. Okay, I'm not sure why that didn't take. We'll just try it again. Okay. Don't know why. Sometimes that's just the way it works. So you want to make sure you go back to world. So I just did that through a control shift menu. And then this guy is oriented basically straight down. So I'm just going to pull that down. And again, wireframe unshaded may be beneficial so you can really see that your offset is relatively consistent. So something like that's looking pretty good. I'll need to do the same where I add one more this direction, and then up here I'll need to add one more too. So I'll go ahead and do that. In interactive split here to over here somewhere like this, and then I'll grab that guy, V, snap that out. This is just going to build up that angle a little bit. I don't love that, actually. I certainly don't love that. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, since this is somewhat arbitrary anyways, and I'm going to slide this guy in. I just feel like this needs to closely adhere to the shape of the hinge. So something like that is going to be more like what I feel like it should look like. So something like that might actually be fine. And then maybe what I'll do is, since I don't really know what this is supposed to look like, just get rid of this thin piece right here. Because ultimately I think it looks like we're starting to bark up the wrong tree here. That just isn't feeling right to me anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. Edit Mesh and Interactive Split. Again, you'll see that I'm using the same tools over and over and over again. And I have this set to one magnet, so when I snap this, it'll snap directly to the center. I should have gone all the way up here, but I didn't. Okay, and so now this side goes away like that. And then I need to make sure this edge also needs to go away. When you delete edges, incidentally, use Shift right click delete edge. If you just delete an edge, select the edge and just press the delete key, it'll actually leave the vert. So see that vert is still sitting there? So your form is still affected as if that edge was there, but it's not. So what you want to do, and you can just go back and delete that vert, it's not that big a deal, but if you just do it with Shift right click delete edge, notice that that form changes. So now I just want to make sure I select this vert and match it up to this guy here. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. And now I'm just going to need to make the inside of this form. Once I finish this guy down here needs a little bit of work too. So let's see, I need to add two verts here, one to offset down over here and one for over here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that again just with the interactive split. So again, I think it wants to work on the other side of this object right now. So let me just, sometimes if you click and drag from the edge that you intend to work from, it'll work a little better. Okay, there it goes. That's one of my edges. That's the other. Okay, so this guy here is just going to snap across, and so I can just use the center manipulator and move that. This guy here is going to be aligned on Y like that, and then on X it is going to be aligned over here. So you see I just made that a little offset thing, and it looks like it snapped slightly to the wrong vert. There we go. So that's looking good. So now I basically have something that goes around that new hinge part. The only thing we need to do now is add the inside. So I'm going to go ahead and hide this, and then just extrude these pieces in. That should be fine. And in this case, I'll just drag them in. Use snap there, so those should all be aligning right now. And go ahead and grab all those points that I've just been messing with, edit mesh, merge. Again, make sure that your merge tolerance is very low. I have 1,000th. So you can see all those border edges have disappeared. So everything's looking good there. And I end up with this little bit of a junk box in here. I don't want that. So what I can do is double click, and that'll select the border edge, and then just mesh fill hole, and that'll just create a poly that fills that. And then I can just delete that edge, or I could leave it, it really doesn't matter. It just looks a little cleaner without the edge there. So something like that's looking pretty good. I'm just going to turn off the wireframe on shaded to get a sense of what we have. Looking pretty good. These edges here need to be softened. Okay, there we go. It looks like that piece is relatively well taken care of. Go ahead and bring that hinge back. And this guy too. Again, I'll just grab that edge and press the up arrow and then soften those. And then maybe just grab that vert and delete that vertex, and you see that I'll take all those edges with it. Okay, so now I have the start of my hinge for the barrel part, and this piece is completely done. So I think that's enough for this video. In the next video I'll take on maybe the hammer and the handle or something like that.